Hey, gladiators, welcome to Unit 1A, Lesson 1, where we're going to talk about an introduction to government, and specifically we're going to talk about geographic distribution of power. The goal for this lesson is for you to be able to define the three types of geographic distribution of power. But first, we need to talk about why we have government in the first place. So I want you to take a moment, you're going to pause the video here, and I want you to think about four different things that you need to survive. Not just things that you want, but what you need to survive as a human being. Now, what does it mean to survive? Well, survival is what is necessary for a person to live or exist. So pause here and take a moment to write down four things that are necessary for your survival. The reason that we're talking about survival and the things that are absolutely necessary is because once upon a time, human beings, that was what we did. All day was just about survival. It was just about finding food. And the people who did that were called hunters and gatherers. They were called that because that's what they did. They hunted and they gathered food, and they had to follow the food wherever it went. They couldn't they didn't have nice homes with brick or anything like that where they could stay a while. They had to follow the herds or the seasons for, where plants were plentiful and things like that. And they often had to live in very, very small groups because the more mouths you have to feed, the harder it is to find that much food. Eventually, we came up with farming, and it was called the agricultural revolution. So with farming came more homes. It made it so that more people could live together. And when that happened, we realized, ooh, you know what? When people live together, sometimes they don't always get along. And so what they ended up doing is they ended up creating civilizations. And part of a civilization is the idea that you are going to have written records, written communication, and a government in order to determine what is okay in your society and what is not okay in your society. One of the earliest rulers to do this was this guy called Hammurabi, and he was a king of Babylon. He was really a conqueror. He actually managed to conquer lots and lots of other cities surrounding the area of Babylon. The thing that Hammurabi is most known for is that he actually had one of the very, very first written codes of law. And so we actually still have his law code written down. It was interesting because it wasn't written on paper. It was actually written on a stone pillar. It was carved into a stone pillar in the middle of town so that everybody knew where to go and look up the laws. So make sure you get down the good and the bad. So the good things about Hammurabi's rules is that it listed the consequence with the rule. You knew what would happen if you broke that rule. It was meant both as a deterrent, but it was also meant to show you kind of just how serious a specific law was. So for example, if a man put out the eye of a nobleman, his eye should be put out. This is where the phrase an eye for an eye comes from. It's from Hammurabi. So if you put out a rich person's eye, they get to take your eye out. I know it seems a little gruesome. The bad thing though about Hammurabi's laws was that not everybody was equal in his laws. His laws were classist and sexist. So it treated men and women differently, and it treated poor people and rich people differently. So if you're a rich person and somebody puts your eye out, you get to take out their eye. However, if a slave has their eye taken out, and yes, there was slavery at this time period, if a slave's eye was taken out, the person who took out the slave's eye only had to pay their owner half of the slave's value. That doesn't seem the same as losing an eye to me. So we have these ideas, we have these laws, and this is kind of where the idea of having a government comes from. And so that's what this entire class is all about government, where our government came from, and how it actually works, and how it's supposed to work, both how it does work and how it's supposed to work. So a government is a form or system of rule by which a country, state, and or community is ruled, is governed. So basically, it is the system by which a region is ruled. There are 3 different ways to categorize governments, and make sure you're writing these titles down in the box in the 3 boxes. So the first one that we're going to talk about today is geographic distribution of power. So this is the where. You just have to put the titles down. So geographic distribution of power is talking about the where. Where is the power located for a country? The next is citizen participation. I'll move my face here so you can actually see it. Citizen participation. Citizen participation is who or how many people actually get to participate and make decisions. And so we'll talk about that in lesson 2. In lesson 3, we're going to talk about democratic leadership. So basically, who actually gets to pick the leadership in a democracy? We're going to talk about all of the different types of democracies when we get to that lesson. So the first thing you need to know is, what are we talking about when we talk about geographic distribution of power? When we talk about geographic distribution of power, we're talking about the balance of power between a central government and a local government. So are all of the decisions made in one place, in a central location for the government, or do the little local areas actually get to make their own decisions? All right, so there are different levels of each of these different types of geographic distribution of power. So the first type is a unitary government. And in a unitary government, it is central. All of the decisions are made in one place. When we talk about unitary, if you have a unicycle, you have a one-wheeled cycle, right? So in a unitary government, all of the decisions are made in one place. Now, that doesn't mean that it's just one person making decisions. It just means that all of the decisions are made in one city, one location. Our next type of government is basically the opposite of that, where in a unitary government, all of the decisions are made in one central location. In a confederation, all of the decisions are made by independent localities. So this is where it's just a loose alliance of independent states. This is what the United States was before the current Constitution. When we started off as a government, the states each were kind of their own little countries, and they just kind of allied together for big stuff. When we think of a confederation today, we typically think of the European Union, because the European Union is an alliance of different countries that rule themselves. Finally, we have a federal distribution of power, and a federal distribution of power is kind of a mix between a unitary government and a confederation. In a federal system, the powers of government are divided and shared between a national government and a local government, or lots of local governments. This is the system that we have now. So there are decisions that are made for us in Washington, D.C., like, are we going to go to war? Are we going to trade with this country? Are we going to trade with that country? Then there are also decisions that are made on local levels, like, what kind of schools are we going to have? How many schools are we going to have? Are we going to fix the potholes out on Baxter Street? So in a federal system, you've got some decisions being made at the national level and in the national government, and you've got some decisions being made at the local government level. In this lesson, you should now be able to define the 3 types of geographic distribution of power. If there's anything you missed in the notes, go back and watch that part of the video again. If you've got any questions, please feel free to come and ask.